Welcome back to the online conference of the future of museum professionals in the digital era. We are happy to see that many of you are reconnecting as we have an exciting panel discussion ahead of us, focusing on the crucial and most urgent needs in regards to the training of museum professionals in digital skills. I'm happy to give the virtual microphone over to Margherita Sani now, who will be moderating this panel discussion. Margherita works at the Institute of Cultural Heritage of the region of Emilia-Romagna, where she is in charge of international projects in the museum field. In the last 20 years, she has designed and managed several EU-funded projects, in particular on museum education, lifelong learning, and intercultural dialogue. Margherita, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Natalie, and welcome back, everyone, to this final session of the conference, which is titled, as the conference itself, The Future of Museum Professionals in the Digital Era. Now, I would like to start with a statement which I think is shared by everyone, that in the last years or decades, museums have shifted from collections to people, or in other words, they have put people and collections at the same level, at a par. And usually with this statement, one means people, the audience, but people are also people working in museums, so staff. And in labor-intensive organizations such as museum staff are key. Staff are very important. Some of the management tools that museums use, the self-evaluation tools that we are familiar with, the quality management tools and so on, they also research not only the satisfaction of the audience, of the public, but also the staff satisfaction. And in times, as we are witnessing now, of rapid and unexpected changes, the continuous professional development of museum staff is very important. We also at the Institute of Cultural Heritage have used the opportunity of the Mu.SA project to provide extra training in the digital sphere to our museum professionals, and that's always been very welcomed, and there would be a request for more. So at European level, the topic of skills and continuous professional developments and professional profiles is also central in the debate. And there have been a couple of working groups on this topic. I would like just to mention the Voices of Culture group on skills training and knowledge transfer, traditional and emerging heritage, and the OMC, the Open Method of Coordination group, on the same subject. And you can find the outcomes, the reports of these groups online. And recently, more recently, the European call to develop a blueprint for sectorial cooperation on skills in the field of cultural heritage. So museum professionals are very important. Their continuous professional development is very important, and skills, especially digital skills, are nowadays even more key than ever. So to go more into this subject and look at it from different national perspectives and also international perspectives, we have 5 panelists today with us. We have Alexandre Matos, who has a master's degree in museology from the University of Porto, and he's currently director of the Research and Training Department of Sistemas do Futuro. And he's also professor in the Department of Cultural Heritage Sciences and Techniques, also at the University of Porto, and sits on, is the editor of the CIDOC board, which is an ICOM, one of the ICOM international committees. Then we have with us Philippos Mazarakis, trained in archaeology, history of art, and protection of architectural and urban heritage, who works as the curator of plans and drawings and arms and armors at the National History Museum in Athens, and where he also has designed the policy on digital documentation. And he has been, since 2018, Vice President of ICOM Greece. Romina Surace, graduate in political science with an MA in arts and cultural management, who works as senior researcher at the Symbola Foundation. In Italy, the Symbola Foundation deals with the projects focused on cultural and creative industries, the green economy, local development and social innovation, and every year it releases a very important study, a national report called I Am Culture. And finally, we have Leena Tokila, who from Finland, who has a master's degree in education and ethnology and the vocational teacher's diploma. She is currently director of training and development for the Finnish Museums Association and in charge of the association's international collaborations. She's also a member of the board of ICOM Finland. She has been on the board of ICOM Finland, and she's currently chair of ICOM ICTOP, so the international ICOM committee, which deals specifically with training of personnel, of museum personnel. So with these 4 speakers, we would like to go more into the subject, and I would like to start with a question, which is, I would like to ask you to very briefly draw the scenario in each country against which we can talk about the future of museum professionals. What is it like in your country? What can we mean by the future of museum professionals in your country? And in particular, what are the most urgent needs and the most crucial interventions with regard to the training of museum professionals in your country? Of course, for each of you in your country, and for Leena, not only in Finland, but also internationally, as you are looking at this from the observatory of ICTOP. So I would first like to ask Alexandre Matos to address this question. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I think you are listening to me right. I don't know if there is any connection problem, but I'd like this opportunity to thank all the partners and also to ICOM board, ICOM Portugal board, and our team that help us go through this project. As for our national status here in Portugal, the only data available regarding a whole lot of issues around digital competence for museum professional is the result that we carried and the information that we gathered during the last 3 years of Mu.SA project. With the courses, the MOOC and the specialization course, we have managed to have a more real picture around the needs of the Portuguese museum professionals. And we could see that we do need to put a big effort on ways to address the lack of digital competencies in the museum. Some of them we have managed to build or start at least to build in this project, but I think that the main issue around digital competence is the political change that needs to take place in Portugal, and I guess also in other European countries. We are far better than we were 10 years ago, but that's a reality, but I think this is not enough. As we are experiencing during this crisis, some museums and museum professionals are doing their best to overcome the current situation, adding material to the collection website, filming and creating online visits, virtual visits, producing digital content like quizzes and other tools, adding some cool stuff to help their audience to overpass the quarantine at their homes. But this is not a structured response, and it's far from being a widespread response to the crisis. Some museums have more tools, more capacity to do this. Others are struggling to give their employees a computer so they can work from home. Some of them are doing cool stuff and with their digitized content, but many others don't have an idea on what to digitize and how to start a project. I can go continuously with the examples like this, but I think that the issue to be resolved is on a different level, the political one. Europe has different paces, different situations, some of them very complex, but I think that we need to embrace digital competences by adding them not as a discipline or teaching material, but as an integrated tool that can be largely used by students as soon as it's appropriate age for them. For this, we need that governments define a digital strategy for schools with the cultural sector and start discussing difficult issues like hardware, software, open resources needed, data, security, obsolescence of this kind of stuff. And this in Portugal, I guess it's one of the main issues that are that is brought by the current situation here in Portugal.
Thank you, Alexander. I think so. You're talking about a national strategy that should support not only museums but also other institutions and also educational institutions, because also schools have witnessed a very rapid change going digital in a matter of weeks, right?
Yeah.
So now we would like to ask Philippos to answer the same question and take us into the Greek context.
Thank you, Margherita. Well, actually, Alejandro has said, in other words, what I was thinking of. Our experiences are quite similar in Greece. I must say that we are experiencing still a generation gap in digital literacy, but it has changed. We are no longer those bringing digitization in the older generation of people in museum who were completely working in a completely different way. Actually, we have become the kind of illiterate when we face the younger colleagues entering the museum sometimes. Also, we must stress that European funding has for a long time been the fertilizer for digital transition in the museums. And we do notice that the private sector and the independent specialists surrounding the museum world have proved sometimes more flexible in dealing with the heavy administrative burden linked with these fundings. But anyway, we have somehow managed to bridge the gap between the museum world and this available money. Today we have been led, I must say, after several packages of European funding to a self-reproducing development and the existence of a whole professional habitat respective with digital activities surrounding the museum. And we also have come to the realization that the digital shift is not only a vehicle for change, but it is also a shifting aim in itself. I mean, museums need to be more productive, of course, and need to compete with every other digital producing, let's say, entertainment or education offer that exists. Let's say that the digitization is not a goal to be achieved. It is an ongoing process that constantly shifts, and so we have to be on the move all the time. So the museum world in Greece is showing much dynamism in all this. It is notable that during the economic crisis, museum became more visited and more visible, and the current lockdown has not managed to throw a shadow over them. If you read the news, if you scroll through the social media, among numbers of infections and casualties and all this, you always have news of cultural activities not exclusively, but in a large measure, emanating from museums. And of course, when we talk about digital knowledge within museums, museums cannot do everything by themselves, but they need to be able to evaluate properly any digital input they ask from the outside world. To make it a little bit more fancy, you need knowledge of the seas if you are to become a great navigator, my dear Portuguese colleagues, even if you don't set your foot outside of your captain's deck. The digital shift will continue. Every crisis and every change will invariably lead to more and more digital. Our work is complex, and you cannot aspire to know everything anymore. The old universal curator is no longer here, but we need to understand each other, and we cannot afford being ignorant in anything in our shiny new digital museum world. In ICOM Greece, we have through recent years tried to offer as much interaction in digital skills through conferences, through workshops, etc. This is exactly the reason why we joined Mu.SA in the first place. So if anything, I would agree with Alessandro that what is mostly needed is museums that can understand, which welcome and promote continuous training of their personnel, not just once, but continuously. And the public authorities also need to make this possible by offering the administrative tools and the setting for this to be able to happen. The experience of the trainings offered by Mu.SA, especially the work-based learning part of it, was extremely helpful in identifying this need. Thanks.
Thank you. Sure. Then embedding the digital thinking, not only digital strategy, but digital thinking in the overall operation of a museum is maybe that change of mind frame that we need and that museums will need, together with sharing resources and knowledge, because no one is able to do it alone. So, Romina, what is it like in Italy?
So, thanks, Margherita, and thanks to everyone. I will start with a question. What museums comes into your mind when you think about Italy? Among the ones I love, there are places like the Museum of Science and Technology in Milan, one of the first Italian museums that invested a lot over the last years in digital transformation, but also places like the Archaeological Park of Ostia Antica, a place where still today it's possible to get lost and disconnect among the ruins of the ancient city. So a timeless experience that have a very little technological approach. So these two images are useful because represent the dichotomy that today characterizes the Italian national system, where digital technologies broke through, but wide spaces of experimentation are still to be discovered. There has been an absence of a national politics at a national level for museums, and this has produced a vibrant but also inhomogeneous reality. In the recent years, there have been two crucial moments at a national level that has improved a lot this situation. First of all, in 2018, the Ministry of Culture and Tourism approved the adoption of the quality standards system for museum, monuments and archaeological sites for the setting up of the National Museum System. And in the text, the importance to internet as the first approach between people and museum has often been emphasized. Secondly, in 2019, the Ministry of Culture launched a 3-year plan for the digitalization of museums, in order to promote all Italian museums capable, a coherent reference of framework, capable of guiding the adoption of digital tools. So we can say that digital transformation is a reality in Italy, but at the same time, there are still some resistance. This, for example, what have emerged from a recent study carried out by the Observatory for Digital Innovation promoted by Polytechnic of Milan. This report argues that 76% of the museums interviewed lack a digital strategy. And this data is fundamental in light of the Mu.SA results, because the lack of a strategy can result in the use of digital tools in a meaningless or trivial ways, we can say. So to improve this situation, in 2020, so at the beginning of this year, the Ministry of Culture in Italy, together with the Foundation School of Cultural Heritage and in collaboration with ICOM Italy, launched an integrated training project for museum professionals. And a week ago, taking advantage of this particular time we are living, in which museums are closed, they have launched also an e-platform program for museum professionals, also to develop digital skills and to offer, to promote useful digital tools to deal with this health emergency. So in general, I can say that museum professionals can contribute to the future of their museums if they are fully engaged in innovative organizational processes. That means working in a multidisciplinary teams, improving collaboration between museum departments, but also between museums and external partnership with other communities. So one of the crucial things to do to improve the ongoing transformation processes is maybe to engage also the leaders of the cultural institution in educational programs, capable of raising awareness of the cross-sectorial and transversal approach that this transformation needs.
Thank you. Yes, we've had perspectives from 3 countries, the 3 partner countries of the Mu.SA project. And now, Leena, it's to you to maybe report a bit about Finland, but also, most importantly, to give us your viewpoint as chair of ICTOP.
Thank you, Margherita. Do you hear me well? Okay, thank you. And it's a pleasure to join this panel. And it's been this far very interesting to listen to all the presentations. And Margherita asked for a scenario from Finland, and maybe the very first one is that we had a snowing this morning. So we had snow on the ground this morning. So it's not a very nice spring here up in the north. But just 3 points from the Finnish point of view. During this corona crisis, I have to say that the learning by doing among museum professionals has been very rapid, and that because museum professionals had to learn quickly how to provide audience with digital services. So we did not provide any courses on this topic, but the museum professionals just themselves took the action, and several digital exhibitions and tours and other ways to provide access to museums were just popping up everywhere, so to say. The second thing from Finland is quite exciting, because the new Museum Act came into force in the beginning of this year. And according to this Museum Act, museums applying for state funding as regional and national specialist museums should, among other tasks, promote museum activities, promote cooperation in museum field, promote documenting, collecting cultural heritage, and promote digital accessibility of cultural heritage. So this digital aspect is written in our very new museum law. So now we are, so to say, waiting how what are we going to do next? Do we provide a lot of training here in Finland, or is it more like, as I previously said, is it learning by doing? I think it's the both cases. We do need some very good training, just as this Mu.SA project, for example. But also, I think learning by doing is quite a good way of acquiring knowledge. The third point from the Finnish point of view is a project we have had by the Finnish Museums Association. It's called the Growing Competencies for Future Museums. And this project is funded by the Ministry of Education and Culture. And the aim of this project is to map present and future competencies and qualifications in museums throughout the country. And we have organized several workshops for museum professionals and to define the competencies needed in the field. And based on these competencies, we built a competence survey that was piloted last summer until last autumn. And we hope that this survey will provide museum with information on the skills and knowledge, competencies, their staff processes at the moment. And so the survey also provides the museum field with information on the qualifications in museums now and in the future. So these are, I think, the main things, main point things in Finland regarding this digital skills. When we talk about this same issue on international level, I think the question is quite challenging. Even though the ICTOP, which is the International Committee for the Training of Personnel, we should know the overall situation, but as you may know, it differs from the European level to the global level. The states and countries are in different phases of the museum field, of the museum sector, and that's why it's a little bit hard to talk about overwhelming reference. But there is a lot of active discussion ongoing in the international museum field in relation to the competence and skills of future museum professionals. And we, ICTOP, we try to provide museum professionals a forum where they are able to discuss these future competencies, because to my mind, I think these digital skills are related to a bigger picture of the future museum professionals and their skills and competencies and knowledge. It's not just about digital skills. I think it's the overall picture of what is needed in the future and how do we get there. And one thing which is very important for us is that our ICTOP annual meetings, we try to arrange them in various places around the globe in order to understand the local circumstances and operating environments of different countries and different museum sectors in their countries. And that's why we've been in Vietnam or Barbados or Namibia and had our national annual meetings there to discuss these competence issues with the local museum professionals. And in my opinion, there are two different kinds of approaches. The other one is that people are talking about general competencies needed in the field, or the other group of people, in their opinion, it's important to make a very detailed list of all the skills the museum professionals should require. And I don't know, I think it's a sort of a mixture of these two opinions, which could be a very good way of approaching this question of competencies required. And I think that even if there is a possibility to find out what kind of competencies we actually need in the future, which I don't know if it's relevant, I think that more and more we have to recognize the situation that one person is not able to gain all the knowledge, skills and competencies needed in museum job. I think it's not possible. So I think that we could call these hybrid professions, so to say, where there is like IT competencies, and then there is competencies in humanities, like history or ethnology or art history. And so somehow combine this kind of IT knowledge and the knowledge of humanities. I think that might be the profile of future museum professionals. And the other important point is the notion of shared expertise. To my mind, teams of experts and learning from each other is one key way of getting the knowledge we need in the future in museums.
Yeah, thank you, Leena. I think it was also mentioned this morning in one of the presentations that there is a need to pool resources together. There actually was one of the questions coming through. How do we set up the digital infrastructures? How do we maintain them? I mean, this requires a very, very strong cooperation. Now, we titled this conference "The Future of Museum Professionals in the Digital Era," but in the meanwhile, between the time we named it and the time we actually are carrying out, the future is here. So we just jumped into the digital era all of a sudden and had to do that very quickly in museums if we hadn't done it already. So my last question to you is to name an example that you saw online. One of the activities that museums, Julia Pagel already mentioned some. One of the activities that museums have undertaken in these times of lockdown that impressed you, or that you thought was particularly interesting or fun or useful, or something that you would like to share with us. And I would like again to start with Alexandre.
Hi. Yeah, I guess I will mention two. One from Portugal. It's the way that the Lisbon Museum, the city museum of Lisbon, is working on a integrated approach using Facebook, their web pages, different contents around the collection, their team and building up virtual visits and guided visits by video, using a lot of stuff that they had before, because they were planning that their digital shift with a from some years from now. And I guess you need to look Lisbon Lisbon City Museum on the web, and you will find out a lot of very interesting material that they are adding to their Facebook profiles and website, and a lot of issues. One other museum that I guess that it's the most interesting challenge. It's from the Getty Museum, that they started a challenge via Twitter, asking people to use their collections to reproduce them with materials that they had at their homes and people that were in quarantine. And the result is very, very funny. You need to look on that. Some other in a national level as well. In Portugal, we have some of museums doing that as well, but ICOM UK launched 2 hashtags via Twitter: connected museums and connected people, that are asking people to use online collections and connect with other museums with the context of their digitized collections. And it's very, very interesting, very nice conversation going on via Twitter. And the other one, connected museum people, is used by museum professionals to introduce themselves, to connect with other museum professionals around the world. And I guess it is two very interesting perspectives and answers to this crisis.
Thank you. Philippos?
Yes, well, you asked for one example. Alessandro talked about 2 examples. I'm going to talk about 4 examples.
Oh, wow. But quickly, though.
Just very, very small things that are happening, because the lockdown took everybody by surprise, and the museums are no exception to this. So what we see today as a proliferation of activity on the net, on the web, is actually work that was already prepared or quite. So today, every museum uploads as much as it can and publicizes, well, it tries to make as much noise as possible. Just to show you the Acropolis Museum. I don't know if you are seeing this page. The Acropolis Museum has shown, is giving to the press one object every few days, to the digital press. So you have something like a museum, an exhibit of the week or something. And you have something like this, which we did in my museum, the National History Museum, last Sunday's Facebook page, where we posted something which was really akin to our current predicament. So this is a letter of 1824 giving instructions to priests how to avoid getting the faithful in the church during Palm Sunday, which was last Sunday, for fear of contagion. Then we have all these hashtags internationally, like museums thank health heroes for the World Health Day last week, and all other kinds of proposals from museums for interactions by their public. So we have somehow the interactive and experiential museum becoming a daily thing in our computer screens at home. And finally, you have private initiatives like the museum inside me, which is a Facebook page asking for people to post their own museum exhibits from home. So the home becomes the museum. Next month we're having the let's say the International Museum Day. So we expect a proliferation of digital activities, and in ICOM Greece we're trying to set up an interactive map of all this. And finally, just one preoccupation that seems to be generalized, especially in private museums, is that they're all visibly concerned not only with their social but also with their financial sustainability. This is very crucial. You see many online shops publicizing organization of bazaars online. You have fundraising activities, etc., etc. It is worth of notice.
Thank you. Romina, very shortly, and Leena also very shortly, because we want to leave time for some questions.
Yes. In order to understand what so the virtual fever, we can say, that is going on in Italy in these days, just type the hashtag Io resto a casa, I stay at home. That reveals to be a very simple intuition that confirms the effectiveness of this tool, especially the social media, and proved to be excellent catalyzers and social symbolic aggregators, more convincing than any other persuasive mode. So the example that not all, in these days, a lot of contents has been created and put online, but not all these contents reflect the same familiarity with the new languages and new instruments. In Italy, one of the cultural institutions that has distinguished in the last years for its creativity is Triennale Milano, that in this occasion launched a very interesting project called the Decameron Streaming Stories, inspired by Giovanni Boccaccio's The Decameron, about a young group of people who stayed outside from Florence for 10 days to escape the Black Plague in 1348, and took turns telling stories to pass the time. So in these weeks, Triennale Milano invited a lot of artists, designers, singers, writers, journalists, and so on, to inhabit its empty space in order to deliver personal stories. So every day at 5 p.m. for all the month of March, a story has been broadcasted on the Instagram channel of Triennale, offering contents capable of putting together entertainment and education. And this project recalled another project some years ago, created by British Museum and the BBC in 2010, called A World History in 100 Objects. It was a series of very short stories aimed at tracking the history of mankind, starting from museums' collections. And thanks to the radio, this content reached British people in unexpected places and moments. So at home, at tea time, but also in car, in the way from home to work, and things like that. So that the project has a big success. Also among the people who have been in British Museum only once, or who never been in British Museum. So, of course, this project I have spoken about was realized in a large scale, but why can we not imagine a similar project realized in a smaller scale, for example, developed together with local partners such as campus radio station? The most important thing from this story and from many other examples, I think, is that the narrative focus shouldn't only regard museum collections, but the connection of its meanings to wider stories that regard all of us.
Yeah, that's very interesting. And the story of the world in 100 objects or whatever was very interesting because it was done through the radio. So something that you're usually used to see, a museum object, was just simply narrated. So that tells a lot. Leena, we have a few minutes for your intervention, and then we go to the questions.
Give you a different example of what happened during these early days of this corona crisis. The Finnish National Gallery publishes research papers. It's actually a research magazine or journal, and it's on web. And in the last number, which was released in the March 27th, the Museum of Contemporary Art Kiasma director Levi Haapola wrote in his editorial, the title was "When Museums Are Open Again, the Crisis Over." I just read a very short text here in the very end of his editorial. Our task in the museums is to ask ourselves what kind of narratives we create from this current time of epidemic crisis and its prevailing dystopic mindscapes. We should ask ourselves, how do we write relevant histories in a time of crisis, and what are those lessons we should learn? Those forthcoming stories should be multiple linked to other stories, individual narratives from all around the world, not only given official truth or nationalistic narratives. I would see our artists from local and global communities being very perspective at this point. And so when this continues. And the postscriptum is the title of this editorial is taken from a column by Anna-Stina Nykänen on the same day edition of Helsingin Sanomat, which is the largest newspaper in Finland, entitled "Why the Closing of the Museums Made Me Cry." The current epidemic reminds the author of the writings after the Second World War, when the opening of the museums was seen as a real sign of peace. And we think that this column by Anna-Stina Nykänen, where she asked why the closing of the museums made me cry, it was very, very strong speech for the museums, and it was very widely distributed in social media as well.
Thank you. Thank you. Now we come to some questions, and I have one for you, Leena, a quick one. Is the survey conducted in Finland about competencies already published, and where?
No, we don't have the results yet. So we do have some results, but it's not finished yet, and we will let you know whenever it's done. I think it's this spring might be the
And then, yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
So where will we be able to find the information about on the website of the Finnish Museums Association?
Of course, yes. And as you may remember, I'm on study leave right now, so Pauliina Kinanen will take care of the project and the results of the project.
Okay. And then we are looking at the questions here. We have several, we have a cluster of questions around all these digital content. Is it just an accumulation of information that lacks a mediation structure. Have museums simply put online what they had, or they have produced more? Is this something which is somehow not so effective because we have gone for quantity rather than for quality? Would some of you like to react to this?
May I answer?
Sure.
Well, a partial answer, of course. There is no definite answer to this, but I do think that it was inevitable. I mean, we are facing a situation that nobody expected. Even if you were looking at the news, you did not imagine the speed at which all this lockdown happened, and this change in our mentalities has jumped upon us. So I suppose it's kind of let's say quantity and noise is something which is inevitable at this period. But I think that it will grow into something much more sustainable and let's say organized. I mean, because everyone realizes now the strength of digital communication for museums, and how you can survive through this, even if we consider our current situation as something which is an exception, and that we are expecting in a few weeks or in a few months all this to have ended. The future is there, as you said, and we are not going back to what we knew 1 or 2 months ago. Change is inevitable.
Right. And we have another question here, or maybe comment, saying after the quarantine, when museums reopen, how important is it to incorporate digital strategies on site, or are digital strategies mostly applied online? I think they are already applied on site. And maybe, yes, would someone like to react to this?
I guess if you have in a proper way a digital strategy, it's a part of the strategy of the museum. So you cannot take to both in different levels. You need to have an integrated approach on digital, because museums tend to be places of physical connections, and they will be, because we have collections and we connect with people throughout our collections. But we need to be on the digital sphere and on the digital space as well, and we cannot be a different alias or a different person in digital and in physical ways. So the strategies should be combined and not be a different thing for the digital sphere.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, please. I agree on this. That I also think that the digital strategy is just a part of the whole strategy for the museum. So it's not different. It's not something which is completely sort of separately done or separately operated. It's part of the strategy of the museum. So I think you have to have a digital strategy now, and now it's a very good time for you to try different options. I think everything is now well taken by the audience. They are very interested in museums and would like to see some more materials or collections online.
I guess, Margherita, just one final, because I totally agree with Leena as well, and with Philippos, when he was saying that we are facing an important time, I guess that the proper way to deal with this is to learn with what museums are doing right now. And to learn, to learn with this, we need to evaluate what we are doing these moments, even though it is a crisis, but it can help us to build up some strategy, or to find our strategy for the future. And we can, that's a lot of data available right now, being produced every single day by people going to our websites, to our Facebook accounts, and we have a lot of input via the social networks, and we can use that data to evaluate ourselves, to
I can't,
We cannot hear you
services
so well.
within the can be used as well for the physical museum.
Thank you. I would like to take one very last question, which says, going digital is somehow democratizing the knowledge and the contents of our museums, but aren't we reinforcing the digital divide between the audiences that have access and good digital literacy and the ones that don't have access at all? I think that's a very interesting question to close with. Leena, you have to unmute yourself.
I was muted. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. This is, as you told Margherita, this is a very important question, and I think it's all across society the same question of digital literacy. When we are thinking about our senior citizens now, for example, in Finland, they are not able to go outside their homes. They just have to stay at home, so they are not able to get access to museums if they are museum lovers, for example, and they don't have the digital skills to do this. So I do know that there are a lot of voluntary people trying to help these elderly people, or otherwise persons who are not so used to use these digital devices. But I'm not sure that the museums the only institutions which try to find the solution to this problem. I think we have to unite our forces with other institutions in society, and also the authorities to find out what to do, what is the best way of solving this problem.
Any other comments or closing comments from our panelists before I hand it over to Cultural Action Europe? Philippos, please, but short.
Yeah. It's just that this question of divide between the haves and the have-nots on the digital world is something which is not only is not exclusively in our sphere of museum work. It is everywhere. I mean, we had lots of discussions about this with schools in the last month. How do school children with no computers can cope? But we have to realize that historically change comes much faster in times of crisis, and that the solution, of course, cannot be to try to stop or to, but we need to try and find ways of involving those who have most difficulty in doing so. So otherwise, discrepancies will always be there. We cannot, of course, eliminate them, but we could eventually make the gap lesson.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Our time is up. I would like to thank you all. Leena, Romina, Philippos, and Alexander. Thank you also for keeping the time. And I would like to hand it over to Natalie. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Margherita. Our webinar is drawing to an end. On behalf of co-organizers of this online conference, let me thank all the speakers for their contributions and all of you for your questions and for being with us today. We would like to receive your feedback on this online conference. Soon after the webinar, you will receive the link to the satisfaction survey. We will highly appreciate to have your feedback on that. With this communication, we will also share with you some of the presentations of today's conference as promised. But for the full package of the presentations, please do check the Mu.SA website shortly. The recorded version of this webinar will become available at the Mu.SA website too, which is www.project-musa.eu. Well, thanks again for being with us today, and we do look forward to meeting all of you or some of you at some of other Mu.SA occasions. On behalf of the whole Mu.SA consortium, we wish you a fantastic afternoon ahead.